Hey everybody, Mike McElroy here with Coast Realty, and welcome to our Chicago real estate market update special coronavirus edition. April was the first full month that we've had under lockdown, so this is our first chance to really look at what a full month under lockdown does to a real estate market. So we've got a lot of news to cover this month. As always, the Chicago market is an incredibly eclectic one. So housing trends in Lakeview are going to be different from Ravenswood, which are going to be different from Pilsen. If you want to know what's going on in your neighborhood, fill out the form below, put in your name, email, and the neighborhood you're interested in, and we'll get back to you with a custom report on that neighborhood. I want to lead off with some big news. So just this past month of April, we hit some pretty important mile markers. Let's start with the city of Chicago for starters. City of Chicago home prices peaked back in 2008, right before the housing crisis really started wreaking havoc on home prices. And they took a pretty long time to recover. Well, just this past month, this April of 2020, Chicago city home prices finally matched their previous highs set back in 2008. So in the midst of all of this, some positive news for Chicago home prices. Now, that said, this market update typically covers a more specific market, the downtown and north side market. That market reached recovery all the way back in 2015. That said, this past April of 2020, median home prices on the downtown and north side of Chicago reached an all-time high. So that's some positive news for you there too. It's important to note that for some of those homes that closed in April, some of those prices were actually set back at the end of February, beginning of March, before things got really weird. So we're going to see even more about how the coronavirus has affected home prices once these May numbers come out in one more month. That said, we have gotten a pretty good look at how the coronavirus response has affected supply and demand in the housing market, and it's substantial. Both supply and demand fell about 60%. Just let that sink in for a second. That is an enormous drop. And it makes sense. We kind of knew it was happening, but to really see the numbers finally come out is pretty impactful. That said, both supply and demand have fallen by about the same rate. So what's really interesting is we were predicting a spring market in which we had a bit of a seller's market. And that's kind of what we've gotten. The best homes that are staged well and priced well are selling really fast, sometimes with multiple offers. And the balance of the market has tipped a little bit more towards sellers. It's actually exactly what we were anticipating, just way less of it. It's an interesting dynamic. We're going to have to see how it continues to play out. But right now, it's actually just as good a time to be a seller as we thought it was going to be. So I want to talk about what comes next. We've been tracking the numbers daily, and we've seen, even over the past week, we've seen the market continue to recover. So new listings, that number has crept back up. Homes under contract, that number's creeping back up as well. So once again, supply and demand are kind of moving in tandem here. This time though, they're headed back up. So what comes next? We expect this trend will continue. One of the reasons is we've been looking closely at showing activity. We're going to link to this in the blog post, but the number of showings every day and every week, that's kind of the tip of the spear when it comes to demand. So it's a really good indicator of where things are heading. Now, at one point, back at the end of March, early April, showings in the state of Illinois were down about 60% from their peak just a couple of weeks before that. And that kind of makes sense, right? We told you that the number of contracts were down. We told you the number of listings were down by about 60%. Once again, the number of showings were down about 60% from their peak earlier this year. Now, since the beginning of April, there has been a significant recovery in the number of showing requests, and that number has climbed back up to the point where it's now only down about 28%. Yep, that's right. So that's really good news. It says that there was a big shock to the market. Things were artificially paused. Both home buyers and home sellers hit the deck and didn't do anything for a couple of weeks. And now they're climbing back on their feet, looking around and saying, okay, we think we're all right. We still want to buy. We still want to sell this year. Getting back out there into the market. We had kind of half of the spring market back at the normal time in February and the first week of March. And we might just have the second half of that spring market in June, July, maybe May. We're not quite sure yet. We're seeing demand start to pick up, and it feels like the beginning of February right now in terms of supply and demand. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. If you're planning on selling your home this year, my advice to you is to start the process now. You should be staging and getting your home ready for the market. And really, with demand recovering, with interest rates still at historic lows, and with inventory frankly fairly low right now is not a bad time to hit the market. I know it seems a little early and like we should let things shake out a little bit more, but people are a little bit more forgiving of market time if you do jump the gun a little bit during this time. And I don't know if it's going to hurt you right now. Anecdotally, we can say that we've sold a couple of listings at record prices, even during the worst part of the lockdown when there was the most uncertainty. If you're buying a home this year, I want you to listen closely. Call your lender right now. Call your lender and ask them how potential changes to financing could affect your home buying situation. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the government-sponsored entities who back up the mortgage market in this country, have been starting to increase their financing restrictions. Now, so far, this is only affecting self-employed individuals and a few people who are a little bit more on the bubble in terms of financing, but you should still call and see how it affects your particular situation. I would recommend if you're planning on buying a home, you may want to move quickly to purchase your home before any changes to financing potentially interrupt your ability to do that. If you're feeling safe, then just continue as normal and maybe even keep an eye out for a great opportunity and understand that you have the opportunity to be a little bit pickier. It's been quite a month for Chicago real estate. We're really interested to see what happens next, so make sure you check in with us next month to see how another month, hopefully our last month of full lockdown, affects the Chicago real estate market. And in the meantime, if you want to know what's going on in your neighborhood, as I said before, fill out the form below and we'll let you know how all of this has impacted your particular neighborhood. I'm Mike McElroy and we'll see you next month.